one. Yazan Harasis, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Peter.
So you've been a co-founder twice, and maybe before that, but you've got two really cool companies. And you start out, as we talked in the pre-show, about you want to max the value from battery energy storage and energy storage across the need in the energy sector. Tell us about that.
Sure. So Power Edison is a company we launched back in 2016. And before that, my first job out of college was at a company called NRG, a large IPP based out of Princeton here. And at NRG, our role within the company, I was in the strategic development group led by my colleague at Power Edison. And our task was to find or to launch the energy storage kind of initiative within NRG. And so we spent probably a year looking at different markets, different applications, where energy storage makes sense, where it doesn't make sense in the lens of an IPP. And that took its course, and then we realized that there's a lot to do with energy storage. How to make it feasible, how to make it economical is a good way to do it is to mobilize the technology. And so what we did was we launched Power Edison in 2016. We developed the technology, developed the engineering into mobilizing these large scale battery systems, as you can see behind me. So batteries on trucks, even batteries on water as well. And the reason being, we're always trying to, as developers, as people applying the technology, looking at the benefit cost ratio. Obviously, the benefits are better than the cost. The project makes sense. It pencils out. But back then, the costs were still high. They still are, but they're coming down. Costs are still high. And people were struggling with the benefit, the revenue stacking, as they call it. And, people often try to look at the cost side and trying to drive down the costs. But, there's mega trends that people wait for. It's not in the hands of usually energy storage, stationary energy storage people. It's usually on the back end of the EV markets, right? So that took its course, driving down the cost. But in the meantime, we were looking at the benefit side of the equation and how do we extract more benefit? And mobilizing it, as you know, energy storage is a very flexible asset, can be used for 20, 30 applications on the grid and off the grid. So the idea was to mobilize it and then start applying it in different locations, park the system, connect it, and utilize it for that revenue stream. And revenue streams are usually dynamic when it comes to energy storage, both in geography and time. So you might need an energy storage asset doing peak shaving in the summer in this circuit. And then in the winter, it needs to be, there's a lot of constraint on a winter peaking circuit. And then during the spring, there's a lot of backfeed from solar. So you put it over here and then the wind is over there. So there's a lot of different interesting. And so it made total sense to us to just move this asset around, plug it in, and then you just 4x the revenues, 8x the revenues and the benefits over the life of the asset, and just becomes a no-brainer to deploy that system.
Wow, unbelievable. So it's really 4 or 8x. That's crazy. I expect you to say a little more, but wow, that's massive. Where are the great applications for these kind of more mobile systems?
It's basically wherever there's a good application for stationary energy storage. The only issue with stationary energy storage is that you put it in the ground. It might make sense for the life of it, but all the applications, the peak shaving, renewables firming, backup power, the kind of what you would expect from a stationary energy storage asset, grid forming, grid following, all these different applications. And then, what we do is for the mobile assets, some people say, you know what, I want to keep it here for 2 to 3 years, and then I'll move it after, the fourth year. And other people, they do intra-year mobility. So seasonally, they move it, daily, they move it, weekly, they move it. So it's so interesting to see all these different customers and how they're thinking about applying the mobile batteries, whether they're IPPs or utilities or CNI customers. They have such a wide range of applications that they like to use the batteries for.
Yeah, it makes sense. I'm curious on CNI, when CNI is a big industry. What are some of the customers that need this kind of, is it data centers? We're hearing a lot about data centers needing way more power, or, I can imagine a fulfillment center or anywhere that I'd even think about. I don't know if you do anything in oil and gas, but different areas where you have remote applications or different needs.
Yeah, it's interesting. Even the oil and gas sector, They're doing, discovery, and they have a need for power that they currently get from diesel generators and natural gas generators. And then our system, we designed it in a way to hybridize generators as well. So it's not just binary, either generators or batteries. You can always hybridize them and you save on fuel. You ramp up the RPMs to the sweet spot, and then it saves on the utilization of the lifetime of the genset, as you know. CNI, it's mainly for, bill reduction. If they have solar on the roof, they can use that solar. As you know, when there's an outage, you can't really use that solar for the building itself, for the load itself. It just disconnects by code. So having a battery there helps them utilize that solar during outage situations, helps shave their peak when it comes to demand charges. So it's just a bunch of different applications that they think about.
That's awesome. So these things, I imagine they're becoming more and more cost effective. Has that made, we see battery prices coming down and down. Has that made your business case even better over time?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we see the battery prices going down. There was a bit of a peak during COVID, but now they come back down a lot. The supply of lithium, we see it as increasing, not decreasing. And just like I said, it's just on the back of mega trends of the EV market mostly. It's not really stationary storage. Stationary storage is really a fraction of what the battery supply is from mainly consumer electronics and then electric vehicles. So yeah, it's just riding on the tail end of that, and the prices have really come down the last few years. And yeah, we're using it to our advantage and deploying batteries, and the benefit cost ratio increases even more.
That's awesome. And now, so your next company, EV Edison, right? We're in South Florida here in Jupiter. I always have to plug Jupiter every time.
Yep.
Florida's probably tired of hearing it. But man, there are a lot of Teslas on the road down here. I think Florida's a natural market because it doesn't get too hot or cold and the roads are very nice and new. And so
Yep.
there's just a ton of EVs and especially Teslas here on the road. Can you talk through sort of the EV applications and where you're seeing demand?
Yeah. It's funny. So, we've been working on Power Edison for a long time. And a few years ago, we've been starting to get a lot of calls from people that, hey, it's like, I want to use your mobile batteries. I was like, what do you want to use them for? It's like, oh, we have a fleet of EVs that we bought, but we haven't really thought about the EV charging piece. So we called our local utility, and, rightfully so, the utility, they have to upgrade feeders, they have to put in a new transformer, and transformers are hard to get by. So they would tell them, 2 to 3 years until I get to you and apply an upgraded service. And so, these EV owners, they're in a conundrum now. They bought all these electric vehicles, they don't have anywhere to charge them, or they have little power at the site. And to them, it's not like they can roll in a diesel generator to charge electric vehicles, from a PR perspective. So they would call us and say, "Hey, can I use your mobile battery to, maybe trickle charge during the night with our low power and then charge up the vehicles, when we need them, or, charge the batteries offsite and then bring them a fresh charged battery on site, and then that would supply the power." So we got those phone calls, so much so that my colleague Shahab and I decided to look into the EV market more closely. And what we realize is that there's a huge potential, there's a huge need for technologies, but also just, very standard EV charging hub deployments around the country. Electrification is happening at a rapid pace in the transportation sector, and then there weren't a lot of solutions to supply the market. So EB Edison, in a nutshell, is a company that we started back in 2021. Think of a traditional supercharging hub developer. So we do that where it's chargers in the ground, just like you would see in a Tesla supercharging hub, but also having the technology of mobility, just like the trailers behind me, putting chargers on trailers to be able to rapidly deploy in different areas, bring in EV charging hub within minutes to any sites. And you can marry that with the mobile batteries. So you don't necessarily have to have the mobile batteries, but these two sister companies, they work together. If a site needs batteries, you can bring it in easily. And so we focus mainly on very high power charging. So we don't really work on the level twos, the residential. We're focused on DC fast chargers for fleets, for medium duty vehicles, and for heavy duty vehicles. And so our landmark projects is actually in Kearney, New Jersey. And Kearney is 10 minutes away from New York City. It's 10 minutes away from the port of Newark, which was recently, I believe, named the largest ports. It overtook Port of LA in the US in terms of volume, I believe. And so being in that location strategically where thousands of trucks pass by every day and more of them are getting electrified, we just wanted to be in that geography. We brought in a lot of power and we're actually in the first phase of developing and building out that site, which is going to be at the end 200 megawatt site, believe it or not, for these charging applications.
Great. So those are actually are they stationary, those applications? The
Yeah.
200.
Yeah. So they would, yeah, stationary EV chargers, high power chargers in the ground. So we're at the end of the day, we're power people and real estate people. And the name of the game with EV charging, as you know, is finding a good location and bringing in a lot of power. And bringing in a lot of power, we can do that traditionally via the utilities, or we can supplement that with batteries and other technologies that we provide as well.
No, that's great. And you guys are former NRG, which is a very smart company going back many years. NRG and Calpine, always the big players. And that leads me into the next question, which is, it sounds like you got a flagship site in New York. Are you looking at Texas at all? I know they've had some outages down there with the winter storm a couple of years ago. Are there any opportunities in ERCOT?
I think there are opportunities in ERCOTs, both on the battery side. There's a lot of batteries being deployed in ERCOT. The only issue with ERCOT is that it's an energy market, not a capacity market. And so you can win big in ERCOT, but you can also lose massively.
Harder to finance, right? You need a
Exactly.
capacity payment to make sense.
There you go. All merchant risk. So, there's a lot of great companies that deploy in ERCOT. NRG, as you know, it's kind of dual headquartered between Houston and Princeton, New Jersey. So we looked at that a lot. That's on the battery side, and then EV charging side. I think there's a lot of opportunity there. There's a few good companies putting in EV charging installations in ERCOTs. We're just from a bandwidth perspective, we're focused on Northeast. We're a New Jersey company. There's so much to do here, so much potential, but we are starting to expand and look at other opportunities as well as they come.
Got it. So you guys are up in New Jersey in the Northeast. So you're touching, I guess, New York ISO, PJM, maybe a little. Are those your primary markets?
Absolutely. New Jersey, PGM, New York ISO, New England ISO, all these RTOs.
Yeah, Little Bird told me they haven't built quite enough, especially in New England. So there may be some opportunities there.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, so let's go down into this project you're doing because that sounds cool. It's 200 megawatts. That's a lot. That's a big project.
Mhm.
How are you guys going about sort of executing on that? Because always project finance is a challenge. We get great entrepreneurs on that are building a tech, and then we get other guys that are building projects, and the investors are so different between these two. It's often a challenge. And I say that there's a huge gap in the market for the investors out there to finance technology, but that also has to be deployed at scale. There was an article in the Wall Street Journal this week. KKR mentioned they're going to start doing that and they deployed some capital. And I think that's really going to unlock energy transition. But I'm curious what you're seeing in the market as far as trying to get something like that financed.
Yeah, absolutely. When it comes to finance, it's interesting. On the finance side, when we talk to investors on the mobile battery side, they love it because it's not a stationary asset. And if things go wrong with the value stack, we can always repurpose the mobile asset and put it somewhere else. So financiers love it. On the EV charging side, I think there's kind of two business models depending on who you are and who you're targeting. You have somebody who's really targeting passenger vehicles. So they would put a charger at a gas station somewhere and then, they do their studies and do their projections on how many people, the utilization, right? The key factor, keyword within the EV charging space is utilization factor of that charger. And, hope for the best. Like we're going to utilize that charger, 10% of the time if we're lucky. Somebody's passing by, they want a coffee, they want a rest as they're going between states, etc. So that's one way to do it. The other way to do it is, which what we're focusing on, as I mentioned, we're kind of targeting fleets, we're targeting medium duty, we're targeting heavy duty vehicles. And that's more deterministic, where we would build infrastructure hand in hand with our customers that are procuring fleets, and they would have a schedule associated with it. They would, it's very deterministic. You're coming at this hour, you're charging this amount of kilowatts and this amount of kilowatt hours, and that's what you're going to pay for. So the customer is happy that they have a deterministic schedule. They're not going to come and find a charger that's occupied. And then we're happy and our financiers are happy because it's very deterministic and the infrastructure that you're building, what the offtake is, what the utilization factor is. And you'll always try to super optimize the utilization, bring it in higher, by perhaps bringing in more vehicles using the same charger, different schedules, different things you can do. But that's the world we live in, where it's working directly with fleet owners as opposed to plopping in a charger at a highway rest stop and then hoping that somebody comes and charges.
It makes total sense because you want to put down 200 megawatts. I think you need, we call it an offtake agreement. Usually it may be different in the EV industry, but so you're partnering with that customer and they're giving you some kind of, I guess, long-term commitment to use your infrastructure.
Exactly. So there's both kinds. Some customers say, "Hey, I want to come in during the day just to top off during my routes," and that's totally fine. Other customers say, "You know what? I want to park and charge during the night so I can be ready for my route in the morning," and that's also something we accommodate. So we're very flexible when it comes to, because it's an early stage. Even the customers, they're still trying to figure out their routes and the logistics and charging and the drivers, and it's very complex. So what we do is we're very flexible in how we contract with different people, whether they need it on a short-term basis, long-term basis, contracted, or they just want it to be there for them to be able to come and charge. So it's, the whole range is there at this stage.
Yeah, absolutely. I always thought, thinking about these EV chargers, right? I thought of it the way you thought about your mobile processes is, where could you go plug down some EV chargers where you could charge more? Where, I mean, double entendre, you could get people to pay more basically where they really need it.
Right.
And kind of the opposite model of having a PPA is just you're essentially betting on the utilization, but choose locations where people will pay more because they really need it. It reminds me of like, the ATM model when it's in the lobby of the hotel, you're going to pay way more for that per fee than you will when it's your bank because you didn't have to go drive to the bank. You
Yep.
really need the money. You're in the hotel and forget about it in a casino. You're really going to pay a lot. So it's kind of off topic of your business model, but I'm curious if you guys have looked at any of those kind of things.
Yeah, it's at the end of the day, it's about convenience. And so, there's applications where and there's requests where like, hey, Yazan, I really need to charge my vehicles, but I can bring them over there. I really need you to come and charge the vehicles over here. And that's where we would deploy mobile batteries. And obviously, there's a cost associated with that to charge batteries, move them, locate them, and marry them with the mobile EV chargers. You know, so some people are willing to pay that charge. Because of the convenience. They don't have the power at their facilities, and bringing their vehicles to another charging hub that might be 15, 20 minutes away is not really practical for them. And so to us, the name of the game is flexibility, mobility, modularity, and we can really establish a makeshift EV charging hub, within minutes of arriving at a site, and that's what keeps us, and that would keep my phone ringing and the team's phone ringing every day, just having these innovative solutions to the market.
For sure. And speaking of phone ringing, I see the boat out there. We're
Yeah.
here in Florida. We love boats, and we're always waiting for the EV boats to come out. I haven't seen any yet, but I've interviewed a couple guys on the podcast trying to do it. Company up in Tampa, a former Tesla guy, I forget the name, but they're
Mhm.
building an EV boat. So we hope to see it soon because it's much cleaner and better for the waterways. But in the same way with any fuel, you can charge a lot more for marine fuel than you can on land because it's just more expensive, more in demand. And are you getting any calls for marine applications yet?
There's been a few where the people are electrifying boats and tugboats and the likes. So the picture behind me is actually batteries on a barge. So fully scaled, decked out battery that can connect to distribution voltage, high voltage, etc. And that's where land is scarce. sometimes, and especially for energy storage systems that have a 20-year life, it's hard to find locations where you can place energy storage systems there for that extended period. And so, just the same line of thinking when it comes to batteries on trailers, batteries on rail, batteries on barges, being able to be flexible and deployed at the waterfront is very valuable to some customers.
Yeah, for sure. You've got a little more real estate. You said you're a real estate guy. Sometimes you've got that real estate in the water that
Exactly. Created your own real estate.
you can take advantage of. And I'm sure there's some power plants in water near the water in the New York metro area.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. There's and most of the hard to get to loads that are experiencing issues are, historically on the water. Think of Miami, think of all these Boston, all these different cities. They're mainly on the water and usually, experience some power issues. They have not necessarily outages and things like that, but just the increased level of electrification is something that we're seeing. And just having a battery system that can shave peaks and help the grid in so many ways is very beneficial.
Absolutely. Hey, so you told me before at Forbes 30 under 30, and I looked it up and it's true. 2022, you were on the Forbes 30 under 30 list. So what was that like? And did you get any value from that? Did you get any inbound or was it more just like put on the wall?
No, the Forbes 30, it's a great honor. And yeah, the Forbes 30 under 30, they have an energy category. So 30 people picked under the age of 30 in the energy, contributing to the energy space. So it was, myself and 29 other remarkable people that's looking into their stories is just fascinating and incredible to see. So it's a huge honor. It's the most value is we have we have conferences for the Forbes exclusive for the Forbes 30 under 30 listers, they call them, from current years and previous years. And so we have a little community of entrepreneurs and innovators and people doing amazing things. And so tapping into that network has been very helpful for me. I met a lot of amazing people, people who have struggled with, you're trying to solve a certain issue and it's nice to, post on the group and 500 different people had that same issue and they would talk you through this is what worked, this is what didn't work and just, pushing you forward. And it's really a lot of success stories with the people there, the folks there. So very happy to be joined and listed amongst them.
That is awesome. There's a lot of power in a network like that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's, I think there's about 20 categories and the way they do it in finance is one of them, food and beverage is another one, energy, sports, entertainment. So there's so many different categories that they list people under. And yeah, the value of the network is incredible. And the value of potential partnerships is also incredible. There's so many people that I've connected with and reached out to and start brainstorming about solving different problems in the industry. It's a small industry, so whether it's solar or wind or batteries or EV charging, they're all work together and you can, be mutually beneficial to each other in deploying, putting all the heads together and, trying to solve these issues that are bigger than ourselves.
For sure. The energy industry seems like a small world sometimes because you have to be committed because it takes long to do anything in the energy industry. So you tend to get to know people pretty well after a while. I think there are some, let's say, tourist investors that came along for a couple of years, but now I think we're getting back to business here, which is great. So speaking of investors, I hear that you're actively looking to raise money. We won't go into any details, but anything you can share is great.
Yeah. So we have a portfolio of different projects, whether it's on the battery side, the EV charging side, and geographically kind of all over. And so I invite anybody to reach out and we can show them the projects we have, the off takers, et cetera, that we've been speaking of today. So really just the whole spectrum of whether investing in companies, investing in projects, different types of projects, different locations. So that's something we can offer that's very interesting to financiers.
That's great. I hope people will reach out. The company's Power Edison, EV Edison. And this has been Yazan Harasis on Energy Superheroes. Thanks for being on, Yazan.
Thanks, Peter.